This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman.
This is Lauren Lester, the voice of Robin and Nightwing.
And you're listening to the DCAU Review,
hosted by Cal and Liam,
streaming at DCAUReview.com.
and on your favorite podcast app.
Gotham City is out of control.
An entire city screaming in fear.
Supervillains walk the streets, preying on the innocent.
They will learn the true nature of power.
The police are powerless. A creature prowls this urban wasteland.
This man.
He moves in darkness. For some, he is a rumor, a name whispered in the corridors of the underworld, waiting for the chance to strike. Let every criminal know the acid taste of fear.
You crazy! Bat! Giant bat!
Gotham has forgotten what justice means. The Dark Knight is here to remind them. Who are you? Batman. Good guys wear black.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 227 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your two hosts, Cal. With me, our other host, the man that runs our Twitter account. It's my good brother. It's Liam. Liam, we are continuing in our 30th anniversary celebration Batman the Animated Series all month long. And of course, that means we are continuing this week with another episode of the amazing Batman the Animated Series.
Absolutely, and as talked about last week, we have ventured into the quote-unquote second season of Batman the Animated Series. There was an initial episode order from Fox for 65 episodes, and then we have now hit the 66th episode, so we're into the latter half or latter third, I guess, of this series here, and kind of halfway through. I think we kind of misspoke last week. It's kind of halfway through this last 20 episodes,
right,
that we make the switch over to Adventures of Batman and Robin. So that it was still technically Batman the Animated Series at this point, as folks will know if they follow our social media. We actually put up a really neat little Fox promo that aired on the local affiliates advertising this episode back in the day. So still technically Batman the Animated Series, but we are for sure heading towards those later episodes where the show would end up getting renamed.
Yeah, definitely misspoke on that. Got too excited about the Adventures of Batman and Robin, but it's still on the horizon. So never fear if you are anxiously awaiting the Adventures of Batman and Robin. But this one is an interesting episode, Liam. We did mention last week. I do remember having this one recorded on VHS, so definitely in heavy rotation as a youngster. This was one that we could go back to and watch over and over again. But I'm excited to see how that familiarity with this episode pans out for the both of us as we go through our review this week. But of course, before we get into our review for this week's episode, which of course I think you said is called Sideshow, this episode originally aired back on May the 3rd, 1994. So we jumped a year ahead there from where we were last week. So means we just celebrated the 28-year anniversary of this episode's debut a few short months ago. And of course, before we get into our four categories and breaking down of our review, we of course are going to get to the official IMDb plot synopsis brought to you by The Pod Tower. Head over to youtube.com/The Pod Tower to check out our full catalog of episodes, every prior 65 episodes, all 65 of those that we reviewed from season 1 of Batman the Animated Series, along with many other episodes throughout the DCU, of course, and bonus episodes. All of that, our full catalog is available at youtube.com/The Pod Tower. Head over there and subscribe today. And not only do you get great content from us, but you get some content from other DCAU content creators that do an amazing job talking about this very show and all of the other shows in the DCAU.
That's right, Cal. So this is the synopsis for Sideshow, which was written by Michael Reeves and Brian Stevens, based on Detective Comics number 410 by Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams, directed by Boyd Kirkland, with music by Michael McQuistion, and another animation pairing this week of Dong Yang with Spectrum on layout duties. And that synopsis reads as such. Killer Croc escapes a prison train and finds refuge with a group of former circus freaks living in the mountains who take pity on him.
Okay. Who take pity on him? Okay, they've ended.
Not needed.
Yeah, not necessarily.
Padding the word count.
Yep. You can draw that red line right through there. Say this is added unnecessary. But I suppose that is a decent synopsis, Liam, as we get into our synopsis here. As we kick off the episode, we are following a train, and we learn through some exposition and some narration from some of the characters in the scene that Killer Croc is being shipped off from Gotham City to upstate, whatever state it is, New York or whatever state Gotham is in, and headed up north via train through the exposition and actually some newspaper or a newspaper headline that the guard that is watching him on this train. We learn that he's been convicted and he has been found guilty and no longer considered insane. So he's been removed from Arkham Asylum.
Don't bother trying, Croc. Those cuffs are stacked polycarbon alloy. Not even you can break them.
So they finally declared old Croc sane and responsible for his crimes.
Took him long enough. I hear they're giving him his own cell block upstate.
Your tax dollars at work.
Oh, wake me if he busts out. That'd be a story.
You know, there's something the brains back at the joint didn't think about.
Yeah, what's that?
Crocodile's got the strongest jaws of any animal around.
Get back!
Did you hear that? Oh, man, did he get loose?
I'm not going near that thing. That he's loose.
So he's found culpable. Justice at work here, I guess. So, so we notice a couple of reporters who are talking about this and sort of laughing and joking. And we cut back to Killer Croc, who is standing there chained up, and he begins chatting with his guard, mentioning that while they have his hands and ankles chained together, that they did not consider one thing, and that is that crocodiles have the strongest jaws amongst all animals, which I don't know. Did we check that scientifically? Is that accurate, or is that just a line that they used here? I don't know. Somebody tweet us at DCAU Review and let us know if crocodiles do indeed have the strongest jaws of all animals. But we learned that they're strong enough to bite through his own chains here, and we get a bit of a scuffle between him and some of the guards, and even the guards behind him that have a gun ready to shoot a dart that has some sort of sedative in it to hopefully sedate Killer Croc, but Croc just sort of brushes it off and continues his melee through the train. But we noticed that one of the reporters that was sitting in the train begins to slip away from the action, and he opens his chest, very, very, very much an homage to Superman here, as he rips open his shirt. And he was wearing that Clark Kent colored suit, that light blue colored suit, but he did have a mustache. So we reveal Batman was on board the whole time. And as Killer Croc begins considering his escape, leading to the roof of the train, Batman is there to meet him, and we get our first little interaction between them as there's a scuffle on the top of the train.
Come on, can't you do any better than that? You want a piece of me? Think you can take the champ?
You're pumped full of sedative, Croc.
You won't get far.
Farther than you.
Croc has challenged Batman to come take him on, and they do a little callback reminding you that Killer Croc was once a wrestling champion. As he says, do you think that you can take the champ? And Batman doesn't verbalize it, but clearly believes that he can. And there's additional fisticuffs that happen. And as Croc continues to attack Batman, Batman reminds him that he's got sedative pumping through his veins and that he's likely going to pass out before he can get very far. But this does not stop Croc from continuing his assault on Batman, and this leads to them both tumbling off of the train and down into the forest below, not before hitting several trees on their way down, which I guess slowed their fall. I don't know, but they land rather suddenly and roughly on the ground, and Croc at that point decides that he thinks at this point this should be the end of the Dark Knight.
That's right. So it would be pointed out here across this battle, even though, as we've established when we reviewed Almost Got Him several years ago now, with best friend of the show, Monica Kobina, in fact, we noted that it was Batman, of course, in disguise as Killer Croc in that episode when he tells the very famous story, one of the more famous clips probably from this show, of I threw a rock at him. And that is in fact what Croc tries to do in this fight 2 times. Yep. First he tries to squish him with a rock while Batman's unconscious, but unfortunately he begins to sort of have his vision begins to cloud, and he drops the rock and actually falls backwards off the cliff himself as his footing gives way. And he wakes up a little bit later, and he's on the run here, and we kind of get like a little like The Fugitive or something going on here as Batman comes to, and we will see Croc run through it. We'll talk more about this in visuals, but Croc sort of running through the forest, cutting through a creek or a river, and then crossing through the woods. He loses part of his prison uniform, and he's on the run. Batman sort of hot on his trail, following his footprints and the articles of clothing he's finding. Finally, as Croc kind of comes to a big cliff, he notices a large tree that he's able to push over, and he's able to sort of create his own bridge. And he crosses there, and as he's making his way across, he notices that Batman's hot on his trail, and he once again throws a rock at him, and in fact it's actually pretty successful here as he knocks the tree and Batman down into down, seemingly falling to his doom. Batman's able to save himself and is sort of trapped below on the cliffs, however, and that gives Croc a little bit of time to get away. However, as the sedative is still sort of coursing through his veins, Croc does make it to a clearing and a ravine, but as he begins to fade out, we see a strange looking young man sort of watching off in the distance, and we see as Croc comes to, he is introduced to a whole cast of colorful characters, those being former circus folk who have come to this sort of a very remote area and bought themselves a little farm, just so they can be free from the prying eyes of the public.
Ah, now. That's better, isn't it? Sorry, we haven't been introduced. Richard, at your service. Like Richard III, I too am rudely stamped.
You have to forgive our dramatic friend. He's nuts about Shakespeare.
These 2 sylvan nymphs are May and June.
Pleased to meet you. Ditto.
And you've met Billy.
You're the one that pulled me out of the drink, ain't you? I owe you.
And I'm Goliath. I helped haul you in.
So I'll buy you a medal.
No need to be shy. We're all family here. It must have been fate that led you to us.
Yeah? What's a freak show doing in the middle of nowhere?
You're one to talk, lizard lips. June, he's a guest. Our circus days are over. We used the money we earned to buy this farm so we could live in peace.
This is a sanctuary, not only for us, but for all our kind. If you're willing to join in the work, you too are welcome here.
Is that a fact?
And Croc is not quite sure what to make of this scenario. As he comes to, he meets Billy the Seal Boy. He meets May and June, which are a pair of conjoined twins. We have Richard, who's sort of a diminutive man with looks to have a hunch on his back, and then of course we have the large man, the strong man Goliath as well. So a whole cast of classic sort of circus sideshow characters. As Croc is now trying to figure out exactly what he can do to stay away from Batman, who he knows is still on his trail.
Yeah, one of the things we'll talk about once we get into our actual score here, but that whole period of time, from the time that they fall off the train to the time where where Croc is saved from the water and comes to, there is 2 words of dialogue during that entire sequence. It's 5. I timed it out. It's like 5.5 minutes or so of no dialogue in the episode. Very interesting choice that we'll talk about here shortly. But yes, as he comes to and is introduced to all of these folks, we learn a little bit about them, how they got there, how they came to be, if you will. They apparently have retired from the circus and have bought this farm, as you mentioned, and they're there to welcome Croc with open arms, and he sees his opportunity to perhaps find some allies in his attempt to stay away from the authorities, and tells a rather fanciful tale about he too was once a circus freak, as he says, and that he was chained up and that they fed him fish heads and stale bread, and that he had attempted to escape at one point, but then they chained him up when they caught him and beat him up, and he was just barely able to make his escape this time. So he's clearly garnered sympathy from the entire cast here, and they very much welcome him and agree to take him in and give him a home. And as long as he's willing to contribute to the work on the farm, that they're going to allow him and any other future people like them to be welcomed there on their sanctuary, so to speak. So we get a scene where Croc does show that he's willing to put in some work, and he's sort of begrudgingly helping move a tractor out of some mud. And it's very, very quickly obvious that the Billy the Seal Boy is very fond of Croc and is excited to have him there and is looking to sort of befriend him. And Croc can't do any better. He's just can't help himself. He is who he is. He's a grouchy man who has no desire to befriend Billy, and is seemingly very standoffish to not only Billy but everybody else there. And even as they're having a meal and Billy talks about how excited he is about their opportunity to go swimming together the next day, Croc plays it off, and he talks about how he left his swimming trunks at home, which prompts Richard, who's seemingly the de facto leader of the group, to mention that yes, they'll have to go get some additional clothes for Croc, and that they have some money left over from their circus days that can purchase some of those clothes. To which Goliath spills that is in fact a nest egg of $50,000. And right after this, Croc nearly chokes on his food before spitting out, wow, that's a lot. You could really go to town with that.
And tomorrow we'll go swimming, right, Croc? Oh, there's the coolest grottos along the river. It's like another world.
Yeah, sure, kid. Too bad I forgot my bathing suit.
That's right. Our new friend here is going to need additional raiment.
Huh?
He means clothes.
Oh, yeah? You guys got money?
Just a small nest egg left over from the purchase of this mill.
50,000.
Oh, thank you, Goliath. It's not something we like to broadcast.
50 grand, eh? guy could go to town on that.
So my question is this, Liam: who's dumber? Is it Goliath for openly spilling how much money that they have stored away, or is it Croc who openly spilled that somebody could really go to town with that money immediately afterwards?
I guess it's Goliath and really all of these fine circus folk, because none of them picked up on the clearly evil man.
Correct.
Openly talking about how he could rob them. Obviously, he sort of plays it off. He tells them that the chains were because he too was a circus act, and that they had kept him locked up and fed him terrible food and all of that. And from there, we see him, in fact, make his way to attempt to steal this little nest egg that the circus folk have made for themselves. But they're right as he does, once again, Billy, the seal boy, is sort of there to not catch him really, because he is able to play it off, but ask what he's doing, and sort of reaffirms to Croc that he has a home here, and that he doesn't need to leave or to be concerned about anything coming after him or getting in the way of his happiness here. However, right around that time, Batman re-enters the fray. We do have probably a couple brief cutaways to him, like climbing up the cliff and kind of still on the trail, but it's very minimal. It's a very minimal
quips
Batman
to no
episode.
one, making quips to no one but himself.
Also, where's the Batplane?
He's too far out of range. He couldn't get it.
Okay.
Couldn't get it delivered. Couldn't radio home to Alfred.
Okay. All right.
I guess. No signal.
Just saying it. All right. Well, we'll go with that.
No, you're absolutely right. Didn't he call the Batplane from the radio, end up radioing the Batplane out in the Gotham desert at one point? I feel like that happened.
Well, Alfred went looking for him after he disappeared for a certain amount of time, and was able to track him via his transponder in his car or something. So I guess he didn't bring his car transponder with him on the train, so maybe Alfred couldn't find him. But yes, anyway, Batman is able to finally arrive at the farmhouse, and he first kind of confronts Goliath and tries to calmly explain to him that he's there to arrest a bad man. But of course, Goliath doesn't want to believe it, and sort of physically attacks Batman. And as Batman is sort of, he has his hands full, certainly, with Goliath, and then of course, as soon as Croc runs out, he's full bore after Batman as well, and in fact is actually able to knock Batman unconscious, and he and the rest of the circus folk lock him up in one of the cages that they have. I don't know why, if you're like trying to get away from circus life, you would bring all of these circus cages to your farm. but they do have all of these cages here. Luckily for them, as they lock Batman in one, and of course take the utility belt off with him. And Croc is very quickly wanting to end things and put Batman out of his misery once and for all. However, of course, the rest of the kindly circus folk aren't really down with that, and aren't comfortable with that. And
listen to me. He's an escaped convict, a cold-blooded killer.
I said shut up!
What he said, it's not true, is it? You're being square with us, aren't you, Croc?
Of course I am. I ain't the one who attacked Big Boy in his sleep, am I?
What are we gonna do?
Get rid of him. What do you mean? If he gets loose, he'll bring them all down on us. No one's safe. The Bat's gotta go.
As Croc takes a pitchfork and is apparently going to stab Batman to death, finally Goliath and Richard and the rest of the crew step in, and once again Croc, at the drop of a hat, just turns on all of his new friends and attacks them, and ends up locking them up as well, with the assistance of some knockout gas from Batman's utility belt, which he has sort of slung over his shoulder. And as Croc goes to sort of take the money and also a gun, and he takes a hunting rifle off the wall, and plans on finishing off Batman before escaping with the money. Batman and the circus folk are kind of able to both get out of their respective cages. And we're kind of setting up our final battle here as Croc sort of realizes he's overmatched now with both Goliath and Batman free, but he's able to sort of barricade himself in the house, and he has one more hunting rifle that he opens fire on both Batman and Goliath, and he seemingly has them dead to rights, as years before it was a meme. He declares that he has the high ground.
That's right. And the gun on top of that.
That's right. So there's a little bit of like like the Simpsons predict everything. That's another one in the Batman the Animated Series predicting something here. So
you can't take me. I got the high ground. I got the gun.
You have Croc with them dead to rights, but Billy is able to alert Batman that there's an underwater entrance they're able to use, and they're able to get in there where Batman can finally confront Croc hand to hand, and they have quite the battle, which again we'll certainly talk more about in visuals. But in the end, Croc is he's almost crushed to death by what do you call those, like water wheel?
I was gonna say, yeah, it's kind of like a water paddle, or I think they're called like a paddle wheel when they're on a boat. I feel like, so I don't know. That sounds about right. Water wheel, sure, just call it that.
A little water mill thing with the big spinning wheel. But he and Croc and Batman have a tremendous fight on this thing, and Croc even almost drowns Batman at one point, but yes, he ends up almost crushed underneath the wheel, which is enough to knock out even someone as powerful as Croc, and Batman sort of takes him and takes him out of the water and saves him. And as we then cut to our final scene here, as Croc is being loaded into he's kind of got the Hannibal Lecter thing going on now. He's got like the straight jacket with the big leather straps on the kind of the hospital bed that's standing upright. But then rather than take him by train, this time they're taking him out by helicopter. And as we get Billy and the rest of the circus folk kind of looking on, Billy asks Croc, why would you do this? Why would you throw all of this away? We wanted you to be part of our family and all of this. And Croc sort of just reaffirms that when Billy suggested that Croc be who he really was, or be himself, well, that's just who Croc is as a person. And so we get kind of a somber note to end it as we see Croc airlifted out of the farm, and we see Batman sort of watching on as we fade to black.
Okay, guys, all set.
Why, Croc? Why'd you turn on us like that? We could have helped you. We could have done something.
You said you can be yourself out here, remember? I guess that's what I was doing. Being myself.
Yeah, so that does it for this synopsis on our end. So let's get into talking about our scores. As I mentioned at the top, Liam, this is one that we had seen quite a lot when we were growing up. It's probably one that I hadn't revisited in quite a while for that reason, because I was so familiar with it. But looking at it under a microscope for this week's episode, I really enjoyed this episode, to be honest. I think that Croc becomes a little bit more he's not quite sympathetic in the way that Mr. Freeze is, or some of the other, Harvey Dent or some of the other Batman villains are, but you really feel for the guy at the end there. It's a really tragic, I guess, ending at the end there when he shares that, yeah, he can't help himself. It's just who he is. He feels like that his greed, his desire to do evil, his desire to be this killer Croc is too much to change his ways. You know, he's set in his ways. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, or whatever cliched saying you want to say. So there's a little bit of tragedy at the end there, especially with this character, Billy, who clearly was just looking for a friendship, a buddy to hang out with, and was so excited at the prospect of hanging out with somebody else. And, you know, had that innocence of a child about him that was ready to believe that this man that he helped out of the water was good-hearted and, you know, is kind of baffled at the idea that he had ill intentions the entire time while he was there. So there is a bit of tragedy to it. I do love, like I mentioned before, that I love that they decided to take that 5-minute period without any dialogue at all. Like, who does that in a children's cartoon? You got to have, and we'll talk about it in a second here, you got to have some amazing visuals. And there's also not music playing either. It's all kind of natural sound for the majority of it. So you got to have some amazing visuals that we'll talk about in just a second here. But man, I love that bold decision, likely by our director and perhaps, you know, our storyboard artist there, to go with the decision there of a dialogue-free period of time. But I think that this is one of the smoothest shows that we've had, where you've had 2 different animation studios too, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I think there's just some great, I love that the story starts with Croc breaking free or in chains, and then at the end, you know, you kind of resolve everything together and you put a little bow on it, and he's back in custody. And there's a difference. They've learned now. They have him kind of in that Hannibal Lecter style helmet that he can't bite out of, and he's in a straitjacket and he's being airlifted, as you mentioned. So I did enjoy this episode. I like Batman having to track him through the forest, and you know, the idea that we all know that Croc isn't changed, that the story that he's telling is not true, that you're in on the secret, but all of these innocent people don't know. So that's in and of itself is also a storytelling device that I feel like works very well. It's like a horror movie where you know that the people are going to be killed. You know that where the villain is, you know where Freddy Krueger is, or you know where Jason Voorhees is, and you know exactly where he is, but you know that the characters in the movie don't know where he is, and that he's about to snap, or that he's a dangerous person. So it builds that tension of like, when's he going to snap? What's going to happen? And just sort of like that dread that you feel on behalf of those characters. So I really like this episode. I think it's a decent one, especially for the amount of times that I saw it growing up. I ended up giving it a decent score of 7 out of 10 for plot. What about you?
Nice. Yeah, I gave it a 6 out of 10. So not too different there. I think for most of the same reasons you've talked about, it's an interesting dynamic because they don't really do a lot to tell you that Croc is conflicted at all. Like it's pretty much clear he's gonna rip these people off, and you know, he's very willing to to stab them in the back, and then to literally stab Batman when he shows up there. So you know he's kind of just looking for the perfect window to get the money and get out of there. So it's interesting in that sense. It's you kind of, I think it does build sympathy for your supporting cast, who you could have just had been kind of these wacky little colorful characters, and maybe you play them for a little bit of comedy and that's all. But you do really feel like they're these, you know, incredibly kind and welcoming people that this terrible person is taking advantage of, and even to the point where they're willing to, you know, physically attack the person that's coming to arrest him at the end of the episode. So it's the way that he sort of manipulates them, even though, well, it's funny because I feel like sometimes, depending on the episode, Croc is kind of played like an oaf. But then in this episode and in his first appearance in Vendetta, which we reviewed quite a long time ago, he's shown to be like quite cunning and manipulative of the people around him as well. So it's interesting, I think, when we get these solo Croc excursions, he's shown to be, you know, quite cunning and smart, and and very vindictive and kind of thinking one step ahead. So I think that's a kind of a fun dynamic as well, to see a character that for the most part in comics is either played usually as a kind of just a complete, mindless monster, or a, kind of a comedic or oafish type of character. It's kind of fun to have him there being the one that's kind of pulling the strings.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it does add a dynamic to the character. When he's in scenes with some of those other classic Batman villains, it's clear that they have another level of brilliance and ability to come up with capers or things that are going to try and foil Batman. He's not on the level of the Joker. He's not on the level of a Penguin. He's not on the level of the Riddler. Like he's on a lower tier when it comes to that, which is why he has to use his physical presence to attempt to fight Batman in most cases. And why he thinks that, having a gun and barreling himself or, hold up inside a barn essentially is going to be the solution to how he's going to beat Batman eventually. Like that wasn't quite brilliant either. Or putting Batman in a cage, like that's going to solve the problem. He did think though to take Batman's utility belt. I'll give him that. He did think before throwing him in there to get that. But I think that it's clear he's not on the upper echelon of intelligence when it comes to supervillains, but he does have a level of being able to take advantage of people's naivete like he does with the circus crew. So he's evil. He's not a nice person, and that's why he's a criminal. He's still a professional criminal though. So that's what he does for his job. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be animation and visuals. And as we mentioned at the top, Boyd Kirkland responsible for directing this episode, and a pair of animation studios, as we've mentioned already. What did you think of this week's episode?
Yeah, I think the first thing that stands out obviously is the setting. It's we're not in Gotham City for one single second of this episode. It's we start on the train, and then we're in the woods, and you've got these cliffs and everything. That the background design, I think, really stood out as completely different than what we might expect from an episode of this series. And then you have the woods, and then you get to this clearing, and they have the farmhouse with the big water wheel that's kind of constantly spinning, and the leftover circus cages, and at one point Croc sort of walking through their barn, and you see all the posters for the various acts that these circus folk were a part of. So I definitely think the background design and the overall setting of the episode is kind of the number one thing to stand out for me.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that some of the animation is really, really beautiful. I think from the get-go, as I mentioned, what is a clear homage to the Man of Steel is a man in a journalist's suit runs through a train to reveal his costume underneath. We get a nice homage to the Fleischer Superman cartoon that was such an inspiration, as we've mentioned countless times, to this series. So I loved that. I loved the fall off of the train and the way that sequence was animated. There's several sort of POV shots and shots of falls, because Batman falls at least 3 times, I feel like, in this episode, off the train, off of the tree as he's trying to climb through that, and then nearly falls off of the cliff again as he's trying to navigate his way to Croc. But there's a shot as they're falling after they hit the tree and then hit the ground. I love the way that they added the effect to the screen to show you that Croc was dizzy and he couldn't quite focus his vision on Batman to get a clear shot to smash him with a rock. Killer Croc's appearance in this episode changes a couple of times, and that was a little distracting for me. There are some scenes where he has the dark black shadows sort of above his eyes and forehead, or in between his eyes and forehead, and then there are other times where that is colored his sort of skin tone, and you don't get the shadows. when he has the shadows, his eyes look very similar to like the Joker almost in some of those Joker episodes. So that was a little bit distracting because he also has the yellow eyes and those big red gums that show up. So it sort of is a similar visual in my mind. Like my mind just plays this trick on me that it's like it's the Joker. It's not the Joker. It's Killer Croc. But the scenes where they chose not to animate or color in that shadow area, it was not as distracting. So there was some inconsistency with that. I did point that out, but I think the one of the most beautiful shots is the one as Batman is falling off of the tree after Croc has pushed the rock over the ledge and has crushed the tree. Batman is in this free fall, and there are these rocks that are coming down. There's the tree. He shoots the grappling hook. It latches on to the rock or the tree or whatever it grabs onto, and then you sort of see Batman weave his way and flip through the debris that's falling, and it was just done really well. It actually reminded me of the scene in On Leather Wings where he's attached to Man-Bat and kind of going through the construction site. It was very, very similar in the way that his cape moved and the way that he kind of spun around and flipped through the falling damage or debris. So I thought that was done really well. I think that Croc, again, just the way that he ran and the way that he kind of lurches forward with his arms hanging a little bit low, very animalistic. I love that they gave him that look. We missed talking about Batman being a world-class pole vaulter also, as he pole vaults his way up to defeat Croc as he breaks into the barn.
Incredible.
But yeah, of course he does. But I thought that the fight on the water wheel too, which by the way, Google says could be water wheel or a wheel mill, as I think we called it both of those things. So both of those are accurate. But as the fight happened on the water wheel, I appreciated that. That was one of my favorite little fight sequences from a kid, from watching this as a kid. So I still enjoy that to this day. But yeah, I think overall it's a very, very strong visual episode. And I think the fact that you have that entire sequence, 5 minutes of screen time where there's no dialogue at all and little to no music at all, you have to have some very interesting visuals. And I think that it felt very cinematic as Croc is running away and gets his shirt caught on the tree. And then you get Batman following behind. And there's sort of these mirrored shots or parallel shots where Croc runs through this little creek and they shoot to his foot, kind of splashing through the water. And then 2 minutes later, you get the same shot of Batman running through the same river in a very similar shot there. I thought that was really great. Again, a very bold decision to not have any dialogue or music in that moment. So you have to back it up with some good visuals. And I thought Batman looked mostly on model. It was definitely the more classic Bruce Timm square jaw, shorter ears look that we're used to. So for all those reasons, Liam, I ended up giving animation and visuals a very, very strong 8 out of 10. What about you?
Nice. I actually gave it the exact same score of 8 out of 10. I think it's just really, really fun. Like I said, just a unique environment. I think my favorite bit of that whole chase scene, which is, as you said, the whole thing is tremendous, but the bit where Croc is running and you see his reflection in the stream, and then he steps in it, and so you see the ripples in the water, and the image sort of dissipates and he runs off, and then you cut back and you see the same thing with Batman sort of hot on his trail, where we see Batman's reflection in the water and then he steps in it and the image dissipates. I thought that was such a cool thing, and I'm sure it was very technically difficult to pull off in animation, but they pulled it off really well there. And then there's that sequence, that farmhouse sequence at the end of the episode is a pretty unique and fun place for a final battle. It's definitely one of those things that it makes sense that this was based on a comic from the 70s because Batman fighting a villain in a farmhouse is like a really strange thing on paper. But the way the way they laid out the story, as we kind of talked about, like it's the outlaw is on the run from the sheriff and makes it to to a nearby town and is laying low or whatever. I think it kind of fits the vibe that this whole episode has. So and I think visually that adds to it. And that final sequence there where Batman's sort of in the water and then Croc sort of jumps out and pulls him under, and they're fighting under the water, and then Batman grabs hold of the wheel, and then you sort of just see the wheel keep moving, and then all of a sudden you see Croc's hands grab onto the wheel as well, and he comes out of the water at the end. Yeah, just some really fantastic stuff from start to finish here, and just a really, really unique setting for an episode. So a lot of fun stuff to be had there.
Absolutely reflected in both of our scores. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be music, of course. And at the top, you mentioned Michael McQuistion, responsible for this week's soundtrack. So what did you think of music? We already mentioned there is a significant portion of a 22-minute cartoon that did not have any music for the most part, but there were some other spots and notable moments when it came to the music for this week.
Yeah, I think the music at the start when Batman and Croc are on top of the train, I noted. I think there's some pretty effective horn use in that sequence, and there's some good dramatic tension there as they're sort of grappling and wrestling on top of the train. I think that sequence is very fun, and then as Croc kind of stumbles and falls backwards right before that sequence that you talked about starts, you kind of get the big dramatic crescendo there. And of course you get the Batman theme brought in quite a few times as well. And the only other music I really had a note for was there is some pretty good, I thought, kind of exciting. It keeps the pace, and the pace sort of quickens as the action heats up in that final bit, which I appreciated as well. But yeah, nothing too memorable as far as like a classic track laid down, but I think it does good as far as playing in service of the episode, and I ended up settling on a 6 out of 10 for my music score.
Yeah, I gave it the same exact score. I think the Shirley Walker Batman theme plays as Batman falls off the cliff, and then again at the end as we kind of sign off and have Batman standing, and we kind of get the look at him with his cape flowing in the wind as he watches the helicopter fly away, or maybe the helicopter flies above him. But the only other notes I had, there was some music that played as Batman is in the cage and figures out how he's going to escape, and as the cage sort of starts rolling down the hill and hits this bump and then breaks on the rocks below. By the way, Batman very lucky, because if that cage goes into that water and it doesn't break the wooden thing, he's just in a cage underwater. He's dead. He's a dead man. Very lucky guy.
Nope.
But yeah, I thought that was good. I think that Batman jumping off the wheel at the end as he sort of outsmarts Croc, and Croc stands there and kind of gets stuck in the wheel, ultimately defeating him. I thought that the music little punctuation there that they had for that was pretty strong. And then I think overall, though, as you mentioned, there wasn't a lot asked of the music this week, because you had such a significant portion of it that kind of played in silence, and they're on this farm. And I think the initial scene where Croc wakes up and is in the barn, and they're looking around at all the circus paraphernalia and all that, there's some light strings that play there that sort of set the tone for that scene as a sort of a peaceful refuge for him to be in. But yeah, there's not quite a Killer Croc hummable theme like there is with a lot of the other Rogues Gallery, so nothing that I felt was too strong, and I think that's but nothing terrible. Of course, it's a Batman the Animated Series episode, so of course there's some great memorable musical moments for the entire episode. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be voice acting, our final category of the day, actually. And we have quite a large cast with such a large supporting cast. Couple of names I know that we'll recognize in there. Let's talk about this week's voice cast.
Absolutely. So really only our one main actor this week, but we have playing the part of May and June, the twins, is Jo Beth Williams, who folks would probably know best from the Poltergeist movies.
Okay.
And several other kind of smaller and television and film roles, but those are probably the biggest name movies that she was kind of had a starring role in. It's kind of fun because even though she's doing both voices, they kind of have like they do enough to show, and that kind of goes back to what we were talking about in plot, where they give you enough of both of them speaking where you feel like there's a little bit of a difference in the personalities and the way they speak, and one of them's more sarcastic and the other one's more thoughtful and sweet. So it's kind of fun. She gets to play with that, even though it's certainly not the biggest part in the episode. I think she does a nice job there.
Yeah, she's again, there's not a whole lot that's asked, but I do appreciate her little interaction with Croc at the beginning, and then there's some back and forth between the more sarcastic one that notates that after Croc calls them all freaks, she notates that he doesn't have much room to talk. So I thought that was pretty witty. And then at the end, where they're appealing to Croc to consider that even though Batman, if Batman is this person that was responsible for torturing and hurting Croc, that he's still a human being and doesn't deserve to be killed. So yeah, it's not a huge role, but it played well, I'd say.
Absolutely. And playing Richard, sort of the de facto leader of the group, is Kenneth Mars, who was had a really kind of prolific career as an actor on stage, as well as in several movies. He was actually in the Mel Brooks film, The Producers, the original version of that, and quite a bit of I believe he did a lot of other voice acting work as well. Also was in Young Frankenstein, and probably maybe most famously to somebody listening to this show, he also played a Triton in The Little Mermaid, so Ariel's dad in that movie as well. So a good deal of Disney and other animated projects to his name as well. But him playing, most of his lines are riffs on various Shakespeare quotes as he's established. So that's sort of his gimmick, to the point where Croc tells him to stuff the Shakespeare at the end of the episode. But that's kind of a fun little side character, and you get that sense of sort of warmth and understanding. So again, with limited lines and limited screen time, I think he certainly maximized his minutes, so to speak.
No, I agree completely. A good casting, and he did exactly what he was asked to do. So I'd say I agree with that.
Absolutely. And then our last two members of the circus crew, we have Whit Hertford as Billy the Seal Boy, who had it's an interesting thing if you look at his IMDb, because he has a whole bunch of things that he acted in as a kid, other voice acting and live action. He was on Full House for a couple of episodes, and then there's nothing until like 2010, when I guess he got back into the business as an adult, but has a lot of acting and writing credits to his name actually, and has done a lot of voice acting as well since then. But we always talk about that he's probably, of the circus folks, he has the most to do, because he's the one, as you mentioned, that kind of gets the most time with Croc throughout the episode. And we always talk about how it can be a little bit of a gamble when you're hiring a kid actor, but I think he does a good job. It almost feels like, to the point where he's so like innocent and kind of naive, that it almost feels like you've dropped into a Disney movie when he's talking.
I wholeheartedly agree. We didn't talk about the way that he has these sort of doe eyes, very much a riff on a Disney type character. But yeah, it's definitely I think he does a fine job. He plays a child, and he sounds like a child, act like a good child actor. I didn't think there was anything bad about his performance. But combined with the visuals, it definitely feels a little bit different than you would expect from a Batman the Animated Series episode. So yeah, I'm with you there. I think it's a good performance, but maybe just a little weird with the way that the character itself is presented.
Yeah, that's fair. And then playing Goliath, of course, we save him for last. The great Brad Garrett returning here, famous for Jimmy John's commercials, and of course more famously for Everybody Loves Raymond and Of course, in the DCAU, he goes on here to play Lobo and Bibbo and a couple other characters throughout the various DCAU shows that would follow. But here we see his first foray into the DCAU, and he plays a big dumb guy. So it wouldn't be the last time Mr. Garrett was called on to voice a character like this. We'll just say that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, not a whole lot for him to do, but I love the line where he blurts out the 50 grand and yeah, he unfortunately doesn't have as much to do as we see later on down the line. His roles as Kilowog or of course as Lobo, but yeah, this was a nice little introduction, the initial role for him in the DCAU, and we know that he's got plenty more legendary things to come up on in the future there. So yeah, pretty minimal role for a person that we know is a solid actor.
Absolutely. And then, of course, finally in our guest cast, we have the returning Aaron Kincaid as Killer Croc. And it's interesting because, again, in his other appearances, he is usually kept to something. Even in his first solo episode, Croc himself doesn't really speak in his own voice until very late in that episode from memory. So it was interesting here. You have a lot more time with him and him interacting with all these wacky circus folk. So it's interesting to see, wow, it must have been tough to keep that voice up for that long.
So tell us, friend, from whence do you hail?
See, I was part of this freak show, same as you. Only they kept me chained like an animal. Day and night, forced me to live in a tank, made me do tricks.
How awful, jerks.
Yeah, they fed me fish heads and stale bread. When I tried to get away, they worked me over pretty good. Put me in chains. Ugh.
Don't worry. Nobody will find you here. Haven't seen a soul since we moved in.
That's good. Real good.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's almost too much dialogue because I think by the end of the episode, I was ready for Croc to be captured. It's just a little too much. Like I remember growing up as
I kind of agree. Yeah.
I remember growing up as a kid, Croc's voice being one of my favorites. I would try and impersonate it. And, it's definitely a unique voice, but boy, man, by the end of this episode, there's so much Croc, even with that 5-minute break with no dialogue at all. There is still so much Killer Croc dialogue that it just feels a bit too much for me. So I was ready for him to stop talking pretty much at the end of the episode. I do think that probably the most poignant little bit of dialogue happens in the final scene, which is between him and Billy, as we mentioned, and that adds a little bit of tragedy to the episode on behalf of Billy and the rest of the circus crew. But yeah, I was ready. Too much Croc. That would be my headline for this one. Too much Croc. You asked a lot of a guy who's doing a gimmick voice, and it's just a little too much.
Yeah, like I said, I think there's a reason that his future and past appearances in this series are kept to sort of more simple and short scenes, whereas here he's really the main character of the whole episode. Like we said, there's a couple little cutaways to to Batman climbing up the cliffs or whatever, but there's not a lot of dialogue. So it's mostly Croc interacting with the other with the other guest cast here. So it's a lot, and it's everything he says is in that one tone of voice because of how sort of crazy this voice is. And I think it works. And we talked about it, I'm sure, in the first time we talked about Croc, but it fits that character design really well. But yes, him being the main focus of an episode and being and talking, being sort of the predominant talker for the episode is a little bit much. But and of course then we have Kevin Conroy as Batman, who as stated, doesn't have a lot to do in this episode. So it really is the Croc show.
Right. Yeah, we get a little bit of Batman interacting with Croc on the train, and then we get Batman interacting with himself on his attempt to track Croc down, and then we have a little bit of Batman interacting with Brad Garrett or Kevin Conroy interacting with Brad Garrett, and then it's more Batman and Croc. So yeah, it's not a lot for Kevin Conroy to do. I think a little bit more dialogue on his end, or the ability for him to kind of balance out the amount of Croc that we get for the episode probably would have lifted my score a little bit. But yeah, it's definitely not his fault. He just doesn't have a ton to do. So that's kind of why I'd say my score ended up where it is, which is, again, it's not, I don't think it's an indictment on anybody that was cast in the show. I just think that the amount of dialogue required from Killer Croc created this dynamic where I was just not, by the end of the episode, I was done hearing voices. I was hoping that we could get maybe another 5-minute segment where there's no dialogue. So I ended up giving voice acting a 5 out of 10.
Yeah, I ended up giving it the exact same score once again. Not surprising. We've had a lot of direct correlation there, but yeah, like I said, I don't think everyone is doing what's asked of them in this case. So I don't think it's not Mr. Kincaid's fault, but yeah, I think that voice just, as it turns out, it works better in small doses, and we found that out the hard way here. So yeah, that brings both of our voice scores to 5 out of 10.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, I guess we can start totaling things up here at the end of our scores, totaling everything. Oh, well, we have before we do that, we get a double bonus score. So one from each of us, I suppose. So I will give you mine, and that is actually the first thing that you see once you play this episode, and that is the title card. This to me is one of the classic Batman the Animated Series title cards. When you say Sideshow, I immediately remember the silhouette of Croc's hand hanging there with the broken handcuff hanging off of it, and then the in the background you get the circus cage, and then the classic circus font with the title Sideshow coming across it. What a tremendous piece of artwork, man. Love it so much. It's one of the ones that I remember and that I will remember until I'm no longer here. So big fan of Sideshow's title card there. Definitely worth a bonus point in my book.
Absolutely. I mean, we talk about that, and it's one of those things where I don't necessarily feel like once we get to Superman and the later shows, I don't necessarily feel like I miss it. But then you go back and, just the work that went into so many of these title cards by, I think Eric Radomski is responsible for, if not all, most of them, including this one here. And it's just, yeah, it's fantastic, really sets the tone there. And, you introduce that little musical sting, and you see that the hand with the little circus cage off in the distance there. It's fantastic.
Yeah, man.
And that moves us over to my bonus point, which is for that opening sequence, as we talked about here, when Croc is sort of being taunted by the prison guards in the train, and he alerts them to the strength of the crocodile's jaw, and you get this really close up picture, and he's kind of baring his teeth, and then sort of slowly raises up his chained wrists and bites through the chain. I will go on record, and this might be, maybe this is hyperbole. I'm known for that a little bit, I think, at times here. I think that is like one of the most iconic shots in the whole series.
It's really good.
I think it might also come down to, there was a set of Adventures of Batman and Robin trading cards
by Skybox.
That's right. And it was, just not particularly well done screenshots of different episodes, not too many of which we have reviewed yet, but one of the episodes they took the trading cards from was this episode, and one of the cards is Croc with baring his teeth with the chains kind of coming up towards his mouth. And so that's an image from this series that has been burned in my brain since I was a child, and reliving it here, I was like, gosh, that's so eerie. And the way he's sort of, talking slowly, he has this real angry look in his eyes, and he slowly brings it up. He really does. You really do get the more of the monster side of Croc, like he's a horror movie villain or something in that moment. So I think that's one of not just the best shot or the best visual moment in this episode. I think it's one of the best visual moments in the entire series.
Wow. Yeah, I don't disagree with you that it is instantly memorable for all of the reasons that you just stated. But yeah, it's incredibly well animated. You get the bite, and then the pieces of the chain breaking off and shooting out, and it's that up close shot where it's really only his eyes to the maybe just below his bottom, where his bottom lip would be, and it's incredibly cinematic. It works incredibly well, animated really well. The sound effects that come along with it done really well. So yeah, I agree with you, and it really kicks off the entire episode and really tells you a lot about this character being a vicious physical threat to whoever he's around, including our Dark Knight. So yeah, I agree with you. That's a great bonus point, Liam.
Absolutely.
All right, Liam, let's total our scores up, and totaling up everything at the end now, including my bonus point, I end up with a 27 out of 40. What about you?
And I am just 1 point lower at 26 out of 40.
Right. So this is an interesting one to discuss rewatchability, Liam. It's a returning guest. It's a returning villain. Now, most of what happens here in this episode does not impact the greater Batman, the animated series timeline. It doesn't necessarily impact the entire show. But Croc isn't done here. He pops up again at least a couple times. And so where does this land for you? Is this a need to watch? Is this a good old fashioned one thumb up? What do you rank this?
Yeah, it's tough for me. I think because it's such a unique setting for an episode, and there's so many cool visuals, as we've just been talking about for the better part of an hour. I think it gets one thumb up for that. And yes, it's a returning villain. It's really the last big spotlight Croc gets, at least in the original series. He does pop up a few times in the new Batman adventures, but as far as this original iteration of Croc, it's kind of his last hurrah here. So it's fun to see him get the spotlight again, even if the voice acting performance maybe grates on you by the end. So I think we can give this one thumb up. As far as consequences for Croc or for the larger Batman show or the DCAU as a whole, not really much, if any, meat on the bone in that department. But yeah, I think we can give this one thumb up just for the uniqueness of the episode.
Yeah, I could take that. Yeah, I think that argument could definitely be made for the episode. So it is sort of a reoccurring character, and if you're a Killer Croc fan, or if you want some fantastic visuals, as you mentioned, I think that's a good reason to say this is one thumb up. But if you're looking at just the most important episodes, or the episodes that you're going to come back to over and over again, I'd say you could skip it. So that's why we're sitting on that fence. We do a great job of sitting on that fence with the one thumb up there. We're not going to not recommend it, but we're not going to recommend it either.
Exactly.
Precisely. All right, Liam. Well, that will begin to wrap us up for this week. One thing you can do is not sit on a fence and support us if you'd like to. You can check us out and support us in several different ways. The easiest ways to do so are to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app, Apple, Google, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all the major ones. Go ahead and subscribe to us on there. You can leave us a review if your app allows you to do that, or give us a 5-star review. We greatly appreciate that if you do that. And then you can also send us your thoughts on this week's episode and other episodes, anything else DC related, via Twitter at DCAU Review, or via Instagram at DCAU Review. Interact with us there. Check out that promo from this week. I love those Fox promos. So so much. I love that they live on in the internet age here on YouTube. I wish we had all of them in high definition, but beggars can't be choosers. Those are some great pieces of my nostalgic childhood history there. So check those out. You can check them out. Liam does a great job of helping us out there with our Instagram. So head on over to Instagram, check out that. You can also support us via the link at the bottom of our anchor.fm page. If you want to support us monetarily, you can also head over to DCAUreview.com, check out the shop, and get yourself a piece of merch, or wait a couple weeks and we'll probably tell you that there's a sale going on. So follow us at DCAU Review if you want to know when the next sale happens. But those are some ways to support us. You can also, of course, subscribe to the YouTube Pod Tower, youtube.com/the Pod Tower, and that helps us out also. So you can subscribe to that channel, like our videos when we post them. Even if you don't consume your podcast that way, head up there, like our videos, give them a view or two. We appreciate it. And Liam, we are somehow winding things up this next week for our 30th anniversary month, and we've got more than one 30th anniversary to celebrate this month, and we're going to highlight that, or should I say, put a spotlight on that next week.
Ooh, nice wordplay transition there, Cal. Yes, that's right. We are bringing back our character spotlight series, and this week it'll be, as you said, Cal, tying in with not only the 30th anniversary of Batman the Animated Series, but with the 30th anniversary of one Harleen Quinzel, who is celebrating her 30th anniversary this year as well. Just recently there was a DC comic book special that came out with a bunch of different great variant covers, including one by Bruce Timm, celebrating Harley in her many forms over the years. And we thought it would be fun to take a look back. This will be volume 1. We're not going to attempt to encapsulate her entire DCAU trajectory here in one episode, but thank goodness. But for volume 1 here, we will be looking at several very notable appearances from Joker's Favor, her very first appearance, all the way through to her first team up with Poison Ivy, and a couple other highlights as well along the way. Plus, we'll look at maybe some tie-in comics and some merchandise that she got made out of it. So always, those character spotlights are always a fun trip down memory lane, not just for the episodes themselves that we've may have already reviewed in full, but also just looking at the impact that a character like Harley has had in a relatively short amount of time.
Absolutely, yeah. 30 years feels like a long time when you write it down on paper, but man, what a time to be alive and realize that if that's a long time, and that's then I'm really old. So I'll just pretend like it's not a long time. 30 years for a character. Gotta love it. But yeah, it's going to be an exciting time to celebrate, and check out that Spotlight Volume 1 of Harley Quinn coming next week on your favorite podcast app, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we will talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.